everybody, and welcome to episode number 6. Today we're going to be talking about 2 mallet warm-ups and stuff, and I'm going to try to keep the blabbing to a minimum so we can get right into the exercises. Now, a really good way to warm up is by start out by doing double stops. That's 2 mallets at the same time. And I like this instead of doing scales, because if you dive right into the scales, you're worrying about all the sideways motion, when instead you could really be worrying about making sure your hands are doing the same thing at the same time. Now, if you're in drum corps around in the 80s, you're probably familiar with an exercise called 6-3-2-1. And I'm not going to play that here because it's boring and it's played out. But basically, in that exercise, if you're not familiar with it, it's when you play 6 eighth notes on every note chromatically all the way up 1 octave. And then you do 3 eighth notes going down, and then 2 going up, and then 1 going down. And I'm not really sure how this exercise came to being, but I think it was something like you had a bunch of snare drummers that didn't know how to play mallets, so you stuck them on there and they couldn't read music. And they were like, all right, hey, play this exercise. So it's kind of boring, and everybody screws up the last part of it anyway. So instead, I have a number of alternatives for you. First up, we got an exercise called bones. And this is a variation on a couple different exercises that the Crossmen played in 2003 and 2004. Hope you enjoy. The next exercise is called Summertime, and it was written by Jim Ancona for Star of Indiana in the early 90s. And I'm not going to give it to you because it is printed in this lovely book up front by Jim Ancona and Jim Casella, which you should totally buy and own. This is a fantastic resource. It includes, the first half of it is just like every instrument known to man, how to mic your setup, lots of 2-mallet technique, 4-mallet technique, timpani technique, arranging techniques. It's really, everybody, even if you're not a drum corps person, should own this book. So, here's Summertime. I should have brought my mosquito repellent. Die. Alright, the next exercise I have for you is one called PM, and I wrote this on the 2004 tour, and it originally actually was meant to work 4-mallet interval technique, and I discovered it makes a really fun double vertical kind of warm-up exercise as well. And if you'll notice, it goes kind of all through the spectrum. It goes down to like an interval of a second, it goes into tenths at the end, it's kind of all over the place. So here's PM. Alright, the next one I want to play for you is called Not Your Dad's Eights. And basically what this is about is you can play 8 on a hand on the marimba. It's not like super applicable to most things, but you can do it and you can focus one hand at a time. It gives you a chance to really see what each hand is doing. So at the top is just the regular scale version that everybody does. And when I was teaching, I figured out that we did everything in like the major keys and the minor keys. And the kids needed something like, just a little bit more engaging. So instead, we have the blue scale version, we have the whole tone version, and for extra credit, you could play the diminished scale version. Of course, there's 2 different variations on the diminished scale. So those are down there, and it just kind of gives it a whole new spice and flavor, especially if you're going to be playing 8 on a hand for a really, really long time. Now, another thing that you'll notice is I have 2 different stickings down here. I have the sticking where you do each hand individually, but I also have a sticking where you alternate your hands. And I think this is important if your pit is playing with your drum line. Your drum line can burn 8th notes pretty fast, but usually people in the pit can't. So as the tempo gets faster and faster and faster, they go to an alternating sticking. And so they still get a chance to work on their scales. It's still useful, but now they can keep up with the drum line as well. So here's Not Your Dad's Eights. Now the next exercise is all about timing. And this exercise called Mutamat is basically a variation on Tom Hannum's timing exercises that he used, except I've kind of flipped them around backwards. In his version, the very first variation was E-anda, and for a lot of beginners, it's a little bit of a tough one. So I kind of flipped all those around backwards, and I've arranged them in order from like easiest to hardest. And I don't really like playing this all on one note because it gets kind of old after a while, but I do want to play it on the marimba instead of a practice pad. So I'll usually play it to the tune of Mortal Kombat, or pick some like little scale fragment of a song and kind of work it through those variations. And it just makes it a whole lot more enjoyable to go through. And there's a lot of variations to go through. So here's a little bit of Mutamat.